Today is August 17th, 2016, and I am Allison Thompson, the director at Marshall Public Library, and we are here at the library talking with Warren Strohm. We've been doing a series about his life that has been quite fascinating. So Warren, tell me more about what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, good morning, Allison. I hope I don't bore you with what I'm going to talk about today, or bore other people that eventually will read it, perhaps. But I recall in the 1960s, and my wife and I, it was kind of my idea. I had an aunt and uncle in California, and they wanted us to come out and see them, one thing. So our four kids were in school. Our two boys were playing Little League that summer. But I put together a deal where the four of us, four kids, along with Ann and I, and Jerry Holmes was with us. He was dating my oldest daughter, and eventually they married later, several years later. But he said he'd like to go along a drive, and he did do quite a bit of driving, because that's a pretty long trip. And some people would say, you are stupid as all get out, and we probably were. But I would like to relate to what we did, and we had the fun we had, and I don't regret it one bit. We didn't spend a lot of money. One of the reasons we took that travel trailer was that we wouldn't escape the expense of seven of us sleeping, getting in a motel every night, and we escaped. We did that. Worked out great. But we had after our children got up a few years, we went to a station wagon. We had two Chevrolet station wagons, I believe. I bought the last Chevrolet wagon I bought it from a dealer in Robinson. One of my customers had it, and it was he traded it in, and it was almost new, and we liked it very well. So I was kind of looking around, and here in town, I seen a Pontiac station wagon, nice big Pontiac station wagon down on Bob Flower's used car lot. That was a lot where the water tower now stands. But anyhow, so I went to them and talked about it, and it belonged to Bill Mealing and his wife. And they had bought it brand new, and had taken it just like new. So it's exactly what we were wanting, something, a heavy car. And the only thing wrong with it did not have air conditioning. So about that time, it was not uncommon to add air conditioning to a vehicle. So I forget who did it. It did the work, but we added a air conditioning to this vehicle, and got it hooked onto the trailer. And around the 1st of August, we made all our plans, and one morning, the seven of us, we were kind of silly, maybe, but we took off for California, 3,000 miles away. Mm-hmm. But it was the longest and best vacation that our family ever took, and I look at it now, and I'm mighty, mighty happy that we were able to do that for various reasons. Our two sons were about 10 and 13 years old at that time, and they were deeply involved in Little League. In fact, I coached Little League one time. Probably was the Nochipithi's team, because that's the fraternity facility or firm that I belonged to here in Marshall, and I enjoyed it very much. But anyhow, the record of wins and losses was really, really close, and our two sons, they had one game left to go, and that was on Friday night. And our plans go was that I said, well, we just got to leave on Monday morning to get there, get done what we're going to do. And so they gave in, and we were in pins and needles until we found out. After when we was on the road, we were on pins and needles till we found out who won that game Friday, whether our team won it or whether not. So we called back, and I think it came out the fact that our team did win. So we were happy about that.
Good.
Our daughters were probably 15 and 17 years of age, and they remember more of this trip than our two boys does at this time, which is kind of understandable. The first day we made 400 miles, and we ended in Springfield, Missouri. And what we knew, my brother-in-law had been out in the West there working on jobs, and he informed us that there were a lot of travel trailer parks in the West where you could park overnight, and so this is what we looked for. And so we spent our first night in Springfield, and then we got the next day we took on west, and I forget where we were the second or possibly third night, but we did not have any trouble, fortunately, and we all had a good time, and we enjoyed the overnight stay in these various travel parks. It was either the fourth or fifth night out, perhaps it might have been the fourth. We made it into Las Vegas, and when we found this real nice park, real nice. They even had two swimming pools there. They had one for kids and one for adults.
Oh, that's nice.
And our kids were just elated and they couldn't wait to get dressed to get their suits on, so they were plunged in these two pools. Of course, they were just using the one, not the adults. And I don't know for sure whether Ann and I had been in Las Vegas. I think possibly we had been in Vegas once before, and if you've ever seen lights, you have never seen lights until you see the lights in Las Vegas. I mean, it is unbelievable. So I think we had our evening meal, and our kids got their jammies on, and we loaded them in the station wagon, and along with Jerry, and we took them downtown to see the lights. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think they'll remember that if they don't remember anything else. Let's see where I'm at now on my notes. My Uncle Dan was an older brother of my dad, and he had lived in East Chicago, Indiana, and worked at a steel mill up there. Well, after World War II, that steel mill owner up there went to California and opened one out there near in Las Vegas area. And he followed his employer out there in L.A. So he was an uncle which was I liked, one of the best I liked, and so was his wife. So after we pulled out of Vegas, I think the next night we pulled into their place that was in Covina, I believe, Covina, California. It was about, I think, 40 or 50 mile inland from L.A. But lo and behold, I didn't know it when we started, but we got there and discussed where we were going to stay. He said, well, just look right out there. They had a double garage, and they had an apartment over the garage, and there wasn't anybody in it. Mm-hmm. And he said, you're fully welcome to stay in that apartment as long as you want to. I said, my goodness gracious, how lucky can we be? So the six of us stayed there, and Jerry stayed in the travel. He slept in the travel trailer. He had a lot more room than he did with with us in there with him, I'm sure. So we had a lot of fun visiting with my aunt and uncle. And one of the things that I remember instinctively that was I went places around grocery store or here and there with my uncle and he in his car. And the first thing he would do when he got in the car under the driver's seat, he would reach for that seat belt. Well, seat belts were just coming in and seemed like here in the Midwest, but anyhow, we didn't pay much attention because they were back here because they were a nuisance, so to speak. Well, he said, my uncle said, Dan said, well, the law people checked out here, and it's a state law that you wear your seatbelt, and you people are going to find that's going to be coming your way, but I wear my seatbelt. And let's see, at that time he would have been probably mid-70s, so to speak, and he lived to be, I think, in his 80s, so he was careful. Let's see, we after we went our plans were that we wanted to see more of California with the kids than the LA area. We took several trips in that area, and then so we decided that we would take off for San Francisco. I don't know whether Jerry went with us. I don't think he did, but anyhow, we took off up through the state of California on the interstates. They had highways, beautiful highways out there compared to what we had back here at that time. But anyhow, we I think it was about 400 miles, so we drove. We didn't take the trailer, of course, and we drove about halfway and visited there, or sightseeing in there. So we found us a motel for the six of us, and had a nice over the night stay. And next morning we took off on up the road, made it to Frisco, and looked at the Golden Gate Bridge, and I think we crossed it and turned around, come back, and seen Oakland, which is across the bay, I believe. That was an enormous big bridge between those two cities. But anyhow, the four kids and us, wife and I, we did a lot of sightseeing on that trip, and which I was sure at that time that we would this would be the longest trip we'd ever go together, because the girls would be in college and they would be going their separate ways, and it turned out it was. So, in fact, and if I remember properly, we did not stay in San Francisco. We started on back, and we stayed at the same motel that we did going up. Mm-hmm. So we felt a little bit at home.
So about when was this? What year?
That's 1966.
1966,
yes,
okay.
I should have told you before.
Well, that's okay. I was sitting here envisioning, the style of vehicles, and I was thinking it was probably around the 60s.
Yes. Also, in the late 50s or early 60s, I had a very good customer that used a lot of fuel. Down at Darwin, he operated one of the gravel pits. He and his stepfather was one of the Stanfields. They operated. They had a pump down on the water and pumped gravel up to the filtering or grading plant, and they used a lot of diesel in that pump, and they ran several trucks. So he was a very good customer. Well, a year or two before that, before we went west, they sold out, and he went back. His wife was from California. Her parents were out there in vineyard country. They raised a lot of grapes, and they were getting age that they wanted to turn it over to Ralph. And Ralph was the type of gentleman that he could do. He was very good with his hands and a very all-around fine man. And so he was out there, and we stopped and said hello to him.
Good.
And that was worth, he and his wife, that was worth a lot to me, because when he decided to leave the Darwin and sell out, he had been so we had enjoyed his business, and he used a lot of fuel. My secretary and I both when he left, we both cried.
Oh.
We liked him so well, and but anyhow, we survived. So let's see, where am I at now? And we used, like I said, we stayed in this motel, did it 2 different nights, but that was the only motel bill we paid on our 30-day trip. So after we came back to my aunt and uncle's, and we stayed we stayed most of the next week, if I remember right, but the kids were getting kind of anxious to get back home, and because school was going to start. So we started back home, and on the interstate highway, and we were I forget which route it was, but we were going the south route, and which did not have any hills or not hills or mountains. There were mountains if you went the north route. But I looked on the map, and we were just a short distance south of the area where, if you look on the map, there's 4 states. Their state lines are an X. There's 4 states that join at one point, and that always bugged me when I was in. When I took geography in grade school, how in the world you would have 4 states that would all come together? Mm-hmm. And we were only about 40 or 50 miles from that, so we turned off and went up past there, and we got to the point, and there's a big monument there where the 4 states come together, and I readily seen real easy why there was 4 states. The state lines came together all there in one point, because there was nothing there. It was nothing but low mountains and hills, and nobody would fight over that. So my question was answered real quickly, and we intended. Ann had an aunt and uncle in Denver. And she had wanting, and she wanted to go past Denver on the way home and see them a little bit. So we did, but this was the process from this location of the 4 states and Denver was one of the most. I got into a situation where I was the adult, the one that 2 adults, my wife and I, but I was responsible. I took the responsibility more or less for 6 other people, and so we started on the highway. It showed on the map real good highways, but it did not show that these were low mountains. And here we were pulling that travel trailer up those mountains, and you don't find any straight level places, it's just all incline. So we were climbing this one mountain, and we began to smell something, and checked, or we had room to pull off to the side of the road, thank goodness, and it was our transmission on our Buick station wagon. It had gotten hot, and so hot that the transmission oil was boiling, if you can imagine that. Mm-hmm. And of course it wasn't working properly. So it just hit me about that time. What are we going to do? Here we are, 150 or 200 miles from any town. Are we going to have to get a wrecker to come out here and pull our car and our travel trailer in. My God, that's going to cost a fortune. It's going to delay us. You got yourself in one hell of a pickle. And I didn't have an answer. And it hit me hard, believe you me, if you can imagine. So we sat there for, I think, half hour or maybe longer, and I said, well, that we could just do one thing. We're going to start her up and see if it'll go any farther. We'll go as far as we can, and then we'll worry about getting a tow truck. So we started the Pontiac station wagon up, put her in gear, give it the gas. What do you know happened? It took off down the road. My good God, praise the good Lord. I was never so happy and relieved. And we made it on the way, all the way into Denver without any problems. Now it didn't. The transmission did not shift properly, but it worked. And so I think we spent one night in the area of Denver, with visiting with my wife's aunt and uncle, and then the kids were a little anxious to head back home, and so Denver's just about 1,000 miles from here, so we headed back towards Marshall, and we were out in probably in the eastern edge of Kansas, and we found a place to stay, and we were rather late getting there because we had driven long that afternoon, but it had a swimming pool, and it was dark and close. When we asked the people, the kids wanted to get in the pool, and the people on the motel said that under the conditions that was quite all right, so they got to spend a little time in the pool. And the next morning, I think, if I remember right, we loaded up early and headed for Marshall. And the kids were in, of course, most of the second and third seat, and they were so excited to get back to home and see their friends. And believe it or not, we stopped at some roadside parks, and that's where we ate our lunch and our little snack. And that, I thank the good Lord, that Pontiac station wagon was holding together and still pulling that travel trailer east. And I was relieved. I think, as I think about it now, I think seriously, I don't think I ever got into a more trying time or trying to make a decision what we were going to do, and certainly I'm worried about my family. I never think, and I'm glad I never got into another situation like that, because I was concerned. So anyhow, we approached Marshall. Our kids got more excited, and I think we pulled in rather late in the evening, towards the end of the week. But we were all grateful for a safe trip. And I wanted to tell you that I don't remember. We didn't spend a lot of money, but we bought all the gasoline on credit card, and out and back. And I remember when I got the bill, we used. And the bill was around $350 for fuel, and that took us from L.A. to San Francisco and back, and over 6,000 miles. So I really didn't think that was too bad. And in 1966, gasoline wasn't near as high as it is these days here in the 2010s, 16. So I think about it a lot since then. The kids don't talk about it much, but I think about it a lot. That I was sick to death that we were able to take that vacation, because I started in the gasoline business in West Union in November 1st, 1950, selling gasoline, fuel, and so on. And I worked straight through. I never took scarcely a day off until 1954. And my sister and brother-in-law was up in Michigan. He was on a construction job up there. And we thought was looking to get away a few days, so we took off up there. Larry was about a year old, so he was born in '53. This was 1954, and I was driving we were driving a 1949 Chevrolet with a 6-cylinder engine. It was brand new. I bought it from the Chevrolet dealer here, Ralph Geckler. Let me have the first, Ann and I together, let us have the first Chevrolet that he got in this year. And we were before we went on that trip, let's see, it was a 49, and Becky was born in February. Well, she was born in February of 50, on February the 3rd, in fact. And I got it just about the time she was born. And my wife was in the hospital, and back at that time they stayed the big share of a week in the hospital before they let them come home. And I drove that car, and it was a new style. I drove back and forth through Terre, and it was a new style, and was very, very, people were very desirous of having something like that. And the grade between Westerhout and Terre was the same as it is now. And I recall that I was stopped over there on that grade. I met some people, or they passed me, and they waved me down and said, "Where'd you get that car?" Said, "Would you sell it? I'd like to have it." Of course, I told them that I'd been waiting a long time to buy a new car, and I needed one, and it was not for sale. But I know there was at least two people that, and they were sincere. They wanted that car, and it was a nice one. So and also about that time was when we moved out of a furnished apartment into the 3-room house down there just south on 8th Street, where Dr. Ilias had his office before he moved up on. He's up on Plum here, where in the brick building where he worked all the rest of his days. You want to get off? Good morning there. Today I want to talk about an era in my life, and I was in the 1950s, but particularly in the early 60s, up to about 1965 or 66. My father, where I was born and raised was down south of Marshall on a 40-acre farm. And when we moved to Marshall, my father did not sell that 40 acres. He rented the house, and there was in the farm ground. There wasn't too much farm ground. It was a livestock farm. My dad used mainly for he fattened out hogs back in those years in the 30s. But anyhow, then he had a chance to buy 94 acres, just about a mile north of Marshall, in the late 1940s. It was part of the English family, and they had moved. They were living in Paris area, and I guess they wanted to get rid of it. So he maybe had a chance to sell the 40 down where we were born, and I put that money in this ground. I'm not sure, but there's about 94 acres of it, and it ran from the west side of Route 1 out and close to just south of where the interstate is now, and ran the right of way on the township road, went west about three-fourths of a mile, and then fronted on the west by a township road. And he was very proud of that, and he ended up putting a barbed wire fence all around that farm and divided it off in the fields, because he from time to time he had livestock. He had quite a few numbers of livestock, because he bought feeder calves and would end up feeding them out until they're ready to go to the slaughterhouse or near that. And I can't remember for sure. That was I was in service for a year and a half during that time, and then when I was in high school, in the fall, for 3 years I was interested in playing football, and the rest of the year I guess I was interested in chasing the girls. But anyhow, that's beside the point. It ate real nice. There was one creek, a small draw that crossed it off of adjoining land, but other than that, there was no drainage from any other land, and he was very proud of it. But let's see, if I remember right, I think he bought that 94 acres for a little less than $100 an acre at that time in the 40s, and I guess that was a lot of money. But I think he ended up. Yes, I know he did. He ended up having it paid for, and that's in fact, and he was when he was age 72, he was rotary hoeing soybeans out there in a small field one afternoon, and he with a WD-45 tractor. And as he approached this draw that went down through there, something happened, and he did not get the tractor turned, and he upset the tractor, and he was pinned under it, I guess. But anyhow, that caused his death, and so of course, he was out there by himself. My stepmother, who was a very gracious lady, she got in her car evening because he had not showed back home, and she drove over here in her car and went out there looking for her. I don't know whether she called for help or just how, but he was not a great distance, but he was probably 100 yards off the road and laying in this ditch, and she called for help, and of course they found him. He had been killed, and this was quite a shock to the rest of the family. But it's happened. I remember very distinctly where I was. It was on a Monday evening, I believe, and I was upstairs over the city hall. The old city hall in council meeting, and somebody came up there and told me that I needed to go told me that basically what was happening, and that was a very traumatic time in my life, needless to say. So, anyhow.
How old were you, Warren?
How old was I?
Mm-hmm.
In 65, I was 37, 38.
My age.
But after he passed away, my brother-in-law and I, Cleo Reisner, took the farmer equipment that he had, and we bought another tractor. And my brother-in-law was laid off quite a bit from his construction work, and we ended up farming that 94 acres between the two of us. He did most of the work, quite frankly, but I did the corn planting and the bean planting, and we raised quite a bit of wheat. So we had a straw bale, and so we cut some clover hay, and we had a nice pole barn out there, and we stored that full of our straw and hay. And that's one of the things that he did in the wintertime. When he was laid off, he would meet customers out there and sell them a few bales of that as whatever they desired. And I enjoyed it thoroughly doing it, because a lot of it was on weekends, and I hate to admit it, I wasn't very proud of it, but I did work a lot of Sundays. Not because I was greedy. So there was a few years that after we paid my older sister, she was single, and so of course she did not participate in it. She took a cash rent as her proceeds from this acreage, and my brother-in-law and I just we attempted to make some money, but there's a few years that we were lucky if we broke even, because farming is a gamble. But we had a lot of fun, and then before in the early '60s, word came through that the federal government was going to put an interstate just north of Marshall, and the engineers, according to, this is one of the things that really had my father upset. The preliminary plan of where the site was for the highway, as it was going to run east and west. They were attempting. There was two railroads just east of Route 1, the north and south, what we call the New York Central, and then the Pennsylvania ran east and west, more or less at a little bit of an angle. But the highway planning engineers were attempting to design the route for the interstate where it could cross the two rivers crossed just northeast of Marshall with one bridge, and they were attempting to design a highway where one bridge would cross both railroads. The reason I'm telling you this is because then it would come on to Route 1, and the site that they were proposing would cross Route 1 onto my father's real estate, and it was going to split that 94 acres in half for that whole distance of the 3/4 of a mile. And believe you me, my father was he was so proud of that he really was worried, and he actually worried about that because he did not want it to happen if there's any way possible. Well, as time went on and things changed and so on, and I guess the engineers decided that was not going to work for that site, so they moved it just about a quarter to half a mile north, and they went through. They split some of the nose ground and some of the Gwinnett ground which would have been the same distance as my father's property. And of course he was elated that it did not split his property. Well, it ended up that he passed away in '65, and they did not have it all completed, but the plans, that is. So they came to me mainly because I managed things for my two sisters, and they were going to need they was going to need a frontage to relocate the frontage road, or the township road, I should say, on the east end and the west end, but it was going to leave us two little plots of ground, but that was much better than what originally was planned. So that's what they end up doing, and you can see that's the layout today as traffic is using that property, those highways. I mean, and of course, I was in the gasoline business. I was a small P compared to interstate service stations, but I knew quite about it. I was in the same industry that I knew that interstate service stations pumped a lot of gasoline and other things, and they were very desirous. So it ended up that my two sisters and I sold two service station sites, one to Sun Oil Company, which would end up they erected a DX station, and it was the first site off the interstate as the traffic came south, and then we sold it across the frontage road. We sold that site to Shell Oil Company, and that type of real estate was very valuable. In fact, it brought good money. I debated about whether to quote any figures, but those two sites brought my two sisters and I and my stepmother. Actually, when she had to understand it, and we gave her. She was her first husband. She'd been married before, but her first husband passed away, and they had no children. But she was pretty independent, and we gave her her share. She didn't want too awful much, so this situation, or just as it happened, my two sisters and I received a pretty nice bundle of money, funds, which just so happened the way the situation, it's like it doesn't happen to anybody and everybody, but we were very grateful that we were not grateful that or we hated to lose our father. We'd like to have seen him live long enough to see this happen, but we did. We sold those two properties for something over $100,000, and that was pretty big money in those days. And being in business myself, it's certainly my portion. My third gave me a pretty good boost to develop not interstate properties, but other properties to sell more product in my territory, and I did use that to good usage, and it don't just happen more or less once, and then it's not going to happen again. So, but we were very very lucky, if you want to call it that, the way it happened.